Everybody here to Seattle University, especially all of those of you who are from off campus. I'm Edwin Vaya, director of the Film Studies program. The Film Studies program is sponsoring this forum, and I should say, like most such forums and lectures around our campus, the university itself has no particular position on these issues, official or otherwise. This is the Film Studies sponsored presentation. At the core of the case our panel is discussing this afternoon is the death of a young woman, Meredith Kercher, aged 21. The senselessness of this loss terrifies us. A civilized people must seek retribution, payment for such a loss. It is an essential way we reconcile ourselves to that loss, a way we mitigate the horror. But there is another kind of horror that haunts this same civilized people. The horror that it might punish the wrong person, that it might in fact compound the loss of innocence. The tension between these two powerful inclinations, the need for closure and the fear of it, is the stuff of drama being played out, in this case, not only in courtrooms, but in network documentaries and movies, and a growing number of books. Here on a university campus, our primary responsibility is to educate and to do so in ways where we respect each other's intelligence and goodwill and need to both listen and speak. I can easily imagine other kinds of forums than this one, with a different emphasis or interest, hosted, for example, by our journalism department, or our Department of Criminal Justice, or our political science department. Our law school might have organized a fascinating formal debate, particularly 2 years ago during the original trials. That said, we are very happy that Paul Holland, Associate Dean of the Law School, has joined this panel. Currently, the verdicts are under appeal by a defense that seeks to overturn them and by a prosecution that seeks to increase the punishment. Our forum this afternoon is aimed at educating all of us, particularly our students who are here, about this complex and controversial issue. Verdicts were reached. The court has published the arguments and evidence, but in light of these arguments and this evidence, and given the special burden on the defense now to overturn these verdicts, what is the case for innocence the defense can make and must make? We are fortunate to have panelists who can speak with both knowledge and conviction. Very definitely, you and I will have some questions and comments. If they are brief, they will be welcomed, of course. And one of our students and I will help make sure that the microphone gets to you when we have the question period. So now it's my privilege to introduce Tom Wright, who will moderate. Tom is a successful screenwriter, documentary filmmaker, an overly committed father, and a valued friend of many years. Please join me in welcoming both Tom and our distinguished panelists.
Thank you, Edwin. And thank you, everyone, for coming out on this rainy day to be part of this experience. I was moved to become part of Friends of Amanda and one of its founders, along with other friends and fellow students of Amanda Knox from Seattle Prep. The website has been in place since the end of 2008, and it came into being as a response to all of the stories and all of the issues that came about at the beginning of this experience. I am a father of a Seattle prep student who attended school with Amanda and had the privilege of knowing Amanda prior to going over to Italy for several years. Saw her perform in drama, saw her as an athlete, saw her as a friend to my child, and that's one of the things that inspired us most, because Amanda and her personality and her character are things that you will be inspired by when you come to know her. I'd like to introduce the panel this evening. Each panelist is going to be given 12 to 15 minutes. We'll go in order from your left to your right. And the final panelist then will lead into the question and answer, and you'll have the opportunity to ask questions for roughly half an hour, maybe a little more. See how it works out. Candace Dempsey, who will give the case overview, and we'll talk about the role of media in Amanda's situation, is the first panelist. Candace Dempsey is an award-winning journalist and author of Murder in Italy, The True Story of Amanda Knox. Her book is a Library Journal bestseller and winner of Best True Crime Book, Editors, and Reader's Choice Awards. A Seattle-based journalist and travel writer, Dempsey's covered the Knox case from the beginning on her SeattlePI.com blog, which has been featured on Newsweek.com and Anderson Cooper 360. She's discussed the case on Anderson Cooper, CNN Headline News, and many other TV and radio shows. When Candace finishes speaking, we're going to give an opportunity to a gentleman named Michael Heavey, who is a judge, but is here in his capacity as a private citizen. Like me, his children attended Seattle Prep with Amanda, and he knows Amanda, and has been inspired to speak on her behalf. This time, he will be speaking at a Rotary Club, which is why he's going to speak briefly at the beginning of our presentation, and has been speaking in Rotary Clubs throughout the Seattle area, and doing many other things that we'll probably talk about as we go. Seated beside Candace is Steve Moore, who will be discussing the crime scene. Steve Moore served as an FBI special agent and supervisory special agent for 25 years. His entire field career was dedicated to the investigation of violent crime and terrorism. After 9/11, he was put in charge of all al-Qaeda investigations for the Los Angeles FBI field office, and was eventually given responsibility for the investigation of all acts of terrorism against the U.S. and Asia. His team disrupted al-Qaeda cells throughout the world, from Indonesia to Pakistan, investigating the murders of hundreds of people. He has served as an assistant legal attaché in a U.S. embassy and testified before the 9/11 Commission. He has lectured on investigative procedure and terrorism throughout the world, notably at the International Law Enforcement Academy in Bangkok. He also served as an FBI undercover operative, SWAT team member, sniper, and helicopter pilot. He is a regular contributor to CNN and has appeared recently on the Today Show, Good Morning America, and Fox News. Next we have Mark Waterbury. Dr. Waterbury received BS, MS, and PhD degrees in materials science and a second BS degree in chemistry. With 20 years of post-PhD experience in a wide range of science and technology fields, Dr. Waterbury has developed, supported, and reviewed forensic tools for many years. He has worked as both a scientist and an engineer, holds 7 U.S. patents, and has developed new peer-reviewed experimental techniques. He has worked for or with the Air Force, Army, Navy, NASA, and some of the largest corporations in the world. One of Dr. Waterbury's specialties has been spotting exaggerated claims and occasional pseudoscience while performing technology reviews. Mark is the author of The Monster of Perugia, The Framing of Amanda Knox, which describes the abuses behind the wrongful convictions of Amanda and Raphael. He has appeared on CBS, NBC, Herald at Large, Fox, and CBS Crime Insider website. Then we have Paul Ciolina. Paul is a lifelong Chicago area resident whose work resulted in the full pardons and exoneration of 5 death row inmates and 3 more serving life sentences. His videotaped confession of a double homicide suspect resulted in the historical emptying of the entire death row population of Illinois. He is the author and co-author of 3 forensic investigative books. He is the former chief of the Illinois Child Homicide and Mass Molestation Unit. He has lectured internationally on homicide and high-profile criminal defense issues. He currently serves as an investigative consultant and on-air personality for CBS News and 48 Hours Mystery. And lastly, we have Professor Paul Holland, Associate Dean of the Seattle University Law School. Professor Holland will begin our Q&A section and speak on, and may have questions about some of the things you'll be hearing from the first 5 panelists as a way of introducing our Q&A. Thank you very much, and we'll start with Dan Stacy. You'll have to be a little patient with us. We have a number of different types of presentations, and we need the video guy.
I can start talking while he's setting up. So I'm really thrilled to be here at Seattle U. My son graduated from here. I myself went to Gonzaga. I have to say that my understanding of Catholicism, as well as my deep love for Italy, helped me understand a lot of the people in the vortex of this crime in Perugia, Italy.
So I'm gonna have to go get cuts and stuff. So in the Q&A, you're okay with that? Yeah. All right.
It should be fine. Okay. Today I'm going to show you 2 videos and also a slideshow, so that's what's taking time setting up. So, and I come to you today as a storyteller. We have many people on the panelists, and this is what I'm comfortable with, because when I was a little girl, I always envisioned myself at the court of the king, and I would be the person brought in at the very end to amuse the everyone and tell them a story as expertly as I could, vividly and factually. And that's exactly what I tried to do in my book, Murder in Italy. And I always wanted it to unfold like a movie, so it's wonderful that I have this set of students here today. Because I saw it as a dream that 2 girls had, 2 beautiful young college girls had, that turned into a terrible nightmare. And so I wanted to trace the path of that dream through all of the events from the, it starts on an Italian Halloween and ends with the conviction of Amanda Knox. So all of the events that go from that time period to then. So I'm going to start my slideshow by showing you what it was like in Seattle in November 2007. And again, I'm an Italian American, and I had planned to write a travel book called From Rome to Africa, because I was a travel writer. I came back from that adventure, and I saw that a young woman had been murdered in Perugia, Italy, a British student. And I thought, how could that be? That's it's near Tuscany, it's not very far from Rome. It's the city of chocolates and jazz. That's all I ever thought of it as. I love that town, it's very beautiful. And that's our sister city, so I thought, how could that be? And then the prime suspects from Seattle, it's just too weird. And so I wrote a blog about Meredith Kercher, the young woman who died. And not really intending to write anything else, I had this blog to explore Italian culture, not true crime. But I became so fascinated by the reaction to my story that I kept following that trail. And mainly people were saying things to me like, Amanda Knox should be lynched. She should get the electric chair. It's too bad that Italy doesn't have that. So I thought, coming from an immigrant family, I thought, isn't justice important? Shouldn't everybody have their day in court? And that was something that we got from our relatives that came from the old country, that they thought justice was so important. They said that if you see injustice, you should speak out. And so I thought, what is our hurry? She's only been arrested 3 days ago. How do we know that she did this? And she didn't sound like a very pleasant person from the newscast. I had no idea who she was. But I started following the trail, as any journalist would, and I started checking my facts. And it just turned out that nothing that we had heard about her was true. And so, of course, if a journalist finds something that's not true, that they can keep following that trail, that's what I did. I just kept following that story. So I'm going to start by showing a video of, again, what it was like in Seattle here. Where's the video?
First, there's a ton of birds.
That's fine. My video has disappeared.
Video gentleman.
It's always the hardest part of every talk I give.
It's the murder case that captured worldwide attention. 20-year-old UW student Amanda Knox has been held in an Italian prison since November of last year for the brutal killing of her roommate, Meredith Kercher.
She just doesn't understand. Why am I here? I didn't do anything.
The authorities believe Amanda, her Italian boyfriend, and Meredith were involved in some kind of sex game gone wrong. But now, new information is emerging. What really happened to Meredith that fateful night?
I can't even imagine how that family feels.
Could Meredith have been more of a participant than a victim? And what about the most recent rumor that Amanda and her boyfriend only knew each other for 2 weeks?
And I'm going to show you my slideshow. So it usually takes longer, but we're going to go fairly rapidly through the photos. Oh, it's right here. That's the video. Yeah. I need you here. Okay. And then I can just press enter. Okay, so this is the cover of my book, Murder in Italy, and it recreates, the cobblestones recreate Meredith Kercher's last walk home. And there's a picture of her in the center of the case because she is the center of the case, she's the victim, and above her is Amanda Knox. And this is Pigott, the city of chocolates and jazz. It's a very, very beautiful city. But during the time period I first was writing the case, it was known as Sodom and Gomorrah. And I was also told that the college students there had were decadent. It was this like terrible place, and I didn't really believe that because I'd been there before. But it does have 40,000 college students, and I discovered that only 400 of them are American. And we had been told that American students had brought death and destruction to Pigott. And obviously, if they did have problems, we could not have caused them. And this is the beautiful torso, and it gives you an idea of how many college students are there. And the whole center of this town, which again is near Tuscany, is like a college campus. This is the only picture ever taken of Amanda Knox with her 2 Italian roommates, Philomena and Laura. And this is the victim, Meredith Kercher. This is the last picture ever taken of her. And this is Halloween night, 2007. And this is a famous photo of her with this great mask in the background. And she had a wonderful time. She was actually out till 5:30 in the morning, partying with her friends in the center. And this is called the House of Horror. This is the house where the murder took place. And you can see it's a very cute little farmhouse, but it is outside the city walls. So it's more isolated than a flat, for example, in the center, which would have been a little bit more safe. And then this is Meredith with her friend Sophie Purton. And the reason I show you this is because Sophie was the last friend to see Meredith alive. And what happened was the day after Halloween, Meredith got up quite late and went over to a friend's house, and they watched a movie and just had a really nice time looking at their Halloween photos, which they put up on Facebook. And I call this the first Facebook media trial of murder because everybody involved in the case had a Facebook. And so a lot of these beautiful photos I'm showing you are from Facebook and MySpace. Anyway, so Meredith said goodbye to her friend, and that's the last that everything else after that is all in dispute. But we know that she said goodbye to her friend about 5 minutes before 9. She went to her house, and this is the house from the back. And if you look at the very upper window, that is Meredith's window. And that is where she died. She was stabbed to death that night. And this is the murder scene, and I propped out. You don't have to worry, you can't see any part of her body, but this is what the police found the next day when the door was broken down. And you can see that it's a very tiny room, and yet 4 people were supposed to have had a sex orgy here, and only 1 person left traces of himself. And this is I like to show these pictures because it's the problem I have with circumstantial cases. Here's a picture of Amanda Knox, and this is the one we first saw of her. Right after the body of her roommate has been found, she is outside being comforted by her boyfriend. And it looks like they're co-conspirators, like they're whispering to each other, all this sequence of pictures. But then many years later, I found this photo, which was taken the same day within minutes of the other shot. And in this one, she looks terribly upset. So again, that's the problem I have with circumstantial evidence, with looking at photos of people and thinking that you know what happened. And this is Amanda Knox the day after the body was found, and the police kept bringing her back to the house day after day after day after day. And this shot, she's actually surrounded by 7 police officers, retelling and telling the story of how she happened to be, where she was on the night of the murder and all that kind of thing. And then this is the famous arrest photos of Amanda Knox. I saw this in Seattle, probably all of you did too, I don't know, but there's a videotape of all 3 prisoners being brought out. And at that time, it was thought that Amanda and her boss, Patrick Lumumba, and her Italian boyfriend, Raffaele Solecito, had murdered Meredith Kercher, again in a drug-fueled sex orgy. And on the right, Raffaele is showing how Italians, when they're under arrest and in front of the cameras, how they cover their faces and everything. And then these are the prosecutors coming out of the Questura. Amanda was questioned all night. I'm not going to talk much about this because I know other people will, but she was questioned all night. But these are the people, the architects of that interrogation. In the very center, we have Giuliano Nannini, very controversial prosecutor. If anyone's read Monster of Florence, you know he's the same prosecutor who questioned Doug Preston and frightened him into leaving the country. And then they declared case closed. They said, these are the people, we have them, they're under lock and key. And oops, the forensics came back. And they discovered that the handprint, there was a handprint on the victim's pillow, did not belong to any of these 3 suspects, but did belong to this young man named Rudy Grede, who by this time had fled to Germany and had to be extradited back. So I thought, I was following the case and blogging about it, well, they're going to have, I wonder what the new crime theory will be. No, they didn't have a new theory. All they did was take Patrick Lumumba out of the theory and insert Rudy. And here's the picture that circulated. There they are. Now, these are the 3 that were supposedly had a sex game gone wrong. And Amanda had met Rudy just one time. He was actually a friend of Meredith's boyfriend, of the victim's boyfriend. She had met him once. I think Meredith met him once. And he had never met Raffaele. And this is an example of the really, really horrendous press coverage during this time period. I'm talking about November, December of 2007, where it actually said that Amanda was caught on tape coming back to her own house on the night of the murder, when she had said that she spent the whole night at her boyfriend's. And as we now know, this tape doesn't even exist. And then here are her parents coming into Perugia for the very first time to talk to the press and to see their daughter and to arrange legal help for her. And I like to look at this date on this particular slide. This is the funeral of Meredith Kercher in London. And she was murdered on November 1st, and look at the date, December 14th. And just imagine what agony this family has been through. And they were finally able to lay her to rest on December 14th. And this is the first picture we had of Amanda Knox for people who didn't know her. This is the only picture that wasn't on MySpace or Facebook. In the whole year that she was arrested, she was held under lock and key without charges for a whole year and finally brought to open court. And this was what I had been writing about. I always wished for her that she would someday have a day in open court and that she could tell her own story. So this is a pre-trial, and this is the first glimpse that we have of Amanda Knox. And there's a famous book called Amanda E. Altry, and this is on the cover of it. I was actually in court that day. And then this is during the trial. She went to pre-trial, she was sent on, and so was Raffaele. Rudy was convicted in a separate trial, so now we have just the 2. Amanda and Raffaele were on trial. And Meredith's friends, there are 7 of them, came to testify against Amanda Knox. And it turns out that they actually didn't really know her. In fact, they'd only known each other about a month and a half. I mean, nobody knew anybody very well. Most of them had met Amanda only at the police station after the murder. But they spent they were on the stand for a whole day talking about her. And then this is Amanda Knox. When she finally got, as I said, I always wanted for her day in court. She actually got to stand up and defend herself for 2 days on the stand. And this is Giuliano Magnini, and here I was trying to show the very close relationship between reporters and the prosecutor, and the police chief, because that's the police chief on the right. And so I've never seen anything like this, but actually during the trial, this one British reporter would be whispering to the police chief when Amanda was on the stand. It was very, very bizarre. You would never see this in the United States. And then this is the night of the verdict. The last day of the trial, I think it ended like at noon, and then all the reporters were in town. It's a huge, huge press siege. They call it the Amanda Show. In English, they call it this. And Amanda and Raffaella were brought to outside the court, and they're in police vans in these pictures. They cannot move. They cannot get out of the police van, and they just let them photograph them like this. And then we were brought back at midnight, and that's when the verdict came out. And I was in the courtroom when that happened, and it was really an excruciating experience because even for people who thought that they were guilty, no matter how you thought, the agony of the families, and Raffaella's stepmother, I'll never forget, she started screaming and screaming in a room that is not much brighter than this room is right now. And it was really a very dramatic, horrific type thing to witness. Sobering in some, you have 20-year-olds being put away for 25 and 26 years. So even if you think they're guilty, it's a very sobering moment when you hear that word condemned. And then the next day, this is the Meredith Kercher's family, and this is their press conference. And the mother said, you have to trust the evidence because it's all you have. And then this is the Knox family. The Times allowed them, I think it was a special day, I don't think that was their actual visiting day, but they were allowed to go and see Amanda the next day. And on the left, you see Amanda's sisters. There's the two littler ones, and then her sister Deanna, and then of course her parents. And then this is Amanda being brought back to court this year. And we had mentioned this during the introduction, but she's actually in 2 trials. She's also been charged with slander, so she has to keep coming into court for that. And her parents have also been charged with slander, so they have to come into court. Raffaella's parents have been charged with invading privacy, or I don't know the exact technical term, but they leaked a video, a crime scene video. So all of the parents are having to come into court for other actions during the time period that their kids are on appeal. And we did have some good news this week about the appeal, and that the DNA evidence looks like it's going to be completely knocked out by the independent experts. So that was really great. And then a star witness was discredited. So, and I'm going to end by showing you what the last day of court looked like. Because again, I have a problem with circumstantial evidence. And one of the things people always say to me is that Amanda was always smiling in court. Well, first of all, she hates the press, who would not, under her circumstances. So the idea that she would wave when she saw the Lifetime movie, it made me laugh, that scene where, I don't know if you all have seen it, where she comes in like she's on a red carpet and she's smiling at us. No, I never saw her do that. I only saw her smile at her family members. And you'll see the reality of the courtroom in this video I'm going to show you. And it was taken the very last day, as I said. And at the end of it, you'll also see the prosecutor's table. And you'll see how many people were prosecuting her. She's supposed to have 1 prosecutor, she had 2. And simultaneously, they run civil suits. So they also had the victim's lawyer was in the courtroom, and also Patrick Lumumba's lawyer, because she had falsely accused him. And I tried to take it back, but once you do it in Italy, you can't take it back. Anyway, so I'm going to show this last video.
Amanda, any word for your supporters in Seattle?
prosecutor's table I was talking about, that table right there. And these are the reporters for OG. You can see there. There's Prosecutor Manini on the left. Okay. So I'll give the floor over to other people now, and thank you so much for coming. It's really nice to talk to young people, because early on in this case, I would talk to college students, and they would say to me, well, they were not very sympathetic. They would always say, well, I would not act like that if I was in Europe, and things like that. And so I think now people are starting to understand that things can happen to people that may be on their control. So thank you very much for coming today.
Those who've known Amanda most of her life know that she's someone of outstanding character. She's an honor student. She tutors others. She helps others. She's a backpacker. She loves the outdoors. She mountain climbs. She hikes. She lights up a room when she comes in. Most of all, she's a friend to pretty much everyone she meets. So when we heard that this had happened, those of us that knew her, and I heard about 3 days after her initial arrest of what had happened, I assumed that this would be a mistake that would be corrected almost immediately. I thought there must be something terribly wrong here for this to have happened. A process occurred after she was arrested, and she was held for almost a full year before any charges were brought. And during that year, something occurred that Judge Heavey called pretrial demonization. And Judge Heavey, I believe, would like to address that concept right now.
Thank you, Tom. Good afternoon, everybody. It's an honor to be here, and I want to thank you all for being here. It's just, I know I'm that one gentleman that came from Connecticut.
Mike, if you want to come up here, you can be in the light.
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay, I'll be brief. First of all, I want to thank Tom. He's kind of brought me in on this whole thing. I don't know if I want to thank him or person, but that was in May of 2008 for me. But there's some other people up on the podium I want to thank too, and that starts with Paul Cialino, because he started it all for me in April of 2008, when he had the courage on a news magazine, when they never take sides, he had the courage to call this the railroad job from hell. And then Candace had the temerity to suggest on her blog, I remember reading it at the time, that maybe there's no evidence against this young lady. And then Steve Moore and Mark Waterbury, who have come forward. Steve Moore, retired FBI. He doesn't get involved in these things. And then Mark Waterbury, a scientist, gets involved. But it's just like every one of you who's gotten involved in this case. I don't know if any other case could attract this many people or this kind of forum. It's just it is a powerful thing. Now, if you think about it, and we've all gone through the slings and arrows of taking a stand on this case. Now, Martin Luther King said, "An injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." But before, I'm going to be real quick. I'm not going to go into my long spiel. But think about it, a judicial system. What is it all about? And what it's all about is this. It is every society has disputes between their citizens. And they have to have a way to resolve these disputes peacefully. Disputes cannot devolve into violence and fester with the threat of violence. And so that's what a justice system is. The resolution of disputes. The society cannot exist, the parties cannot exist unless they get their disputes behind them. In a criminal case is the government, the police, and the prosecution against the individual. That's their dispute. And so we look for certain things in disputes to help. One of the primary things is we look to is it fair? Is it true? Is the evidence we're considering true? And are the decision makers fair? The word prejudice comes from the word prejudge. Have the decision makers prejudged the case? If they have, you can't sit on a jury. I just impaneled a jury today. It's the crane accident in Bellevue in 2006. We had to dismiss a lot of jurors because they had prejudgment about who's at fault for that accident. Now, as you look at the statue of the Lady of Justice, we've all seen it at courthouses around the world, and it sits there with a sword. That's the recognition of the power of the law. And a scale, and a blindfold, and of course the lady represents truth. And the blindfold represents that there is no prejudgment. There is no bias for either party, and they're going to weigh the evidence presented in the trial, in the resolution of this dispute. Now, in Amanda and Raffaele's case, I counted at one point 22 lies that were told about him, and Candace showed a number of them up on the screen that were told about her, absolute lies that were told about her. Let me go back. In this country, when we have 99.9% of all criminal defendants everywhere around the world go to trial anonymously. The jury and the judges don't know who they are until they get to the court. They don't prejudge the case. High-profile cases, like maybe the Green River murder case, you've got to be careful because you cannot put out information that will poison the jury pool and cause prejudgment. And so prosecutors and police in this country and in Italy have a special duty, and that duty is to not release any information to the media that would heighten the public condemnation of the accused. And not only was that segreto istruttore, which is judicial seal in Italy, excuse my accent, Candace, violated over and over. They not only released information, they released false information that came from the police. One of my favorites that the media did was Foxy Noxy was translated into Italian instead of meaning, to me that would mean kind of good-looking Noxy. Was translated evil fox. They left out the Knox, it was just translated that that's what her nickname meant. And then there was information put out that she had a sexually transmitted disease and that she'd slept with 7 Italian men in 60 days. How inflammatory is that? This woman, this evil woman, murder is infecting our men with a sexually transmitted disease. That there was closed-circuit TV, had her entering the house the night of the murder, and it refuted that she said she wasn't there. There was lie after lie, 22 of them. And I would submit to you that there was a lot of prejudgment. There was no questioning of the jurors or the judges about what they thought about the case. A poll published in January of 2009, taken in December of 2008, had Amanda Knox, the most well-known woman in Italy, more than the wife of the French president, who was Italian. And there was almost a universal hatred for her. And the collateral damage for that hatred was Raffaele, because Raffaele was her alibi and he was hers. So he had to go down with her. And so in this, all alone, these two stood in this maelstrom of hatred. They stood trial for their life, and they never had a chance. That's all I have. Thank you.
So, next I'd like to welcome Steve Moore. Thank you. Thank you.
for me. I should start by saying that I am probably the least likely person to be coming to bat for a person convicted of murder. Right now, by my count, I was part of putting away 9 people for life without parole. 2 of them have completed that sentence, and 7 remain in prison. Actually, the other 2 remain in prison too. They're just not aware of it. Let me go back. After 25 years in the FBI, I tend to be, my blink is in favor of law enforcement. I remember when Amanda was arrested, I was in Washington, I was doing an undercover assignment, and my first thought was, my God, who are we sending on these foreign trips? I thought that way pretty much because I was listening to the press and I gave the benefit of the doubt to the Italian police. It was not until just prior to the conviction that my wife said, I've seen some things that concern me. I said, Michelle, you've been an FBI wife for 25 years. When did you lose your way? She said, I really think you should look at this. And I said, tell you what, I will look at this and I will prove within a day that she's guilty. And the day turned into a week. The week turned into a month. And after 2 months of investigating this, I came to the conclusion, and I remember where I was sitting, oh my God, this girl is completely innocent. And then it's like you've just seen a car accident in front of you, and the car's rolled over and it's on fire, and you can't say, well, somebody else will do something. You have the culpable knowledge. So that is why I'm here. I have knowledge that a great travesty has happened, and I am only involved in this because the evidence proved it to me. And this is what I want to go through. One of my friends said, we live in a neighborhood where you have horses. I have a basketball court because it doesn't need to be fed at 6 in the morning. He said, Steve, he's a lawyer, he said, Steve, when you hear the sound of hoofs outside, think horses, not zebras. The reason is, obviously, the most logical explanation is usually the right explanation. That's what they missed in this whole thing. I actually brought some notes for you because I like to be prepared. This is what I believe happened. I'm going to tell you right up front, this is what I believe happened. There is a cottage in Italy where 4 attractive girls, 2 Italian, 1 American, 1 British, live. The day after Halloween, a known burglar who is known to carry a knife, who has had 5 to 6 burglaries in the last month, goes to that house, sees the lights off, throws a rock through the window. There's a reason you throw the rock through the window. It's a standard MO. Number 1, it gives you access to the building. And number 2, it tells all the people, hey, I'm going to burgle you, so if you're there, turn on the light or come to the window. Pretty simple, huh? Throw the rock and it does 2 things for you. Nobody came to the window. He climbed in the window. He started to burgle 1 room. He decided to go into the bathroom to do something, and Meredith came home. And after that, Meredith screamed. He cut her throat. He sexually assaulted her. He took her money. He took her phones. He tried to call to get her ATM number, and he fled to Germany. A crime like that happens somewhere in the world just about every day. The zebra is the prosecution's version of this crime. The prosecution wants you to believe that Amanda and Raphael, who had been dating for 2 weeks, decide for the first time in their life that they're going to do a threesome. So they choose a known burglar who they don't know real well. They've only met once. Raphael had not met him. And Raphael says, yeah, that's a great idea. I'll bring this guy in who's a burglar who I don't know, and he can have sex with my girlfriend. So then they go into the room, and while they're there, Rudy, the burglar, decides to go in and force himself on Amanda's friend, Meredith. Meredith starts to scream, and Amanda goes in, and instead of siding with her friend, she sides with a rapist and stabs Meredith in the throat till she's dead. That's a zebra. There's a problem with that. And I'm going to go through That in and of itself doesn't pass the Giggle test, but let me show you the evidence. They once asked Michelangelo, how do you sculpt the David statue? He said, I got a big chunk of marble and chipped away anything that didn't look like David. That actually is how crime investigation works. You go in, you take everything out that doesn't fit, okay? You remove anybody who couldn't have done the crime, and what you're left with is the person. It's a process of removal, not adding. What you have to do is you have to add evidence and remove suspects. In this situation, they removed evidence and added suspects. That's like driving your car backwards. Imagine going to your car and the steering worked backwards. This sums up the case right now, and it's the most frightening thing I have ever heard a law enforcement person say. We knew she was guilty of murder without physical evidence. Oh my God. The little thing in there is a quote from Inspector Clouseau, it won't be easy, that is why I've always failed while others have succeeded. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the lie of the bleach cleanup, okay? If you see that chalkboard, you see lower right there, all those smears? If you have a big bloody scene and you decide that you're going to use bleach and clean it up, it will look clean to you. It will look clean to you, but when you put that luminol stuff on it, that's what it's going to look like. It's going to look like big smears in the floor, okay? And it's going to glow. If you don't have a cleanup, it's stuff you can read. It's stuff you can look at. So if you've got a clear footprint on a floor, there was no bleach cleanup, okay? On the left, you see a bleach cleanup test. That was a bathtub where they put blood on it, and then they tried to clean it with bleach, and that's what it looks like, just a bunch of smears. With the light off, it looks like a clean bathtub. On the right is a footprint in the cottage the day that they picked up after the murder. Where do you see a bleach cleanup there? That is a clean, perfect impression of a foot, which proves that there was no bleach cleanup. The police knew from the day they saw that there was no cleanup. Now you're saying to me, well then, what made that footprint? You use a chemical in these things called luminol. Luminol is the thing that are in light sticks. You know, at concerts and stuff, you get light sticks. That stuff glows. So what it does is, if you get it in a spray bottle and you spray it on this stuff, there's two things that it reacts to. It reacts to blood really strongly. That it reacts to bleach just as strongly. It reacts to bleach so strongly that, and so similarly, that when you go through forensic training, they use bleach to train you. Because it's hard to go down to the Red Cross and say, I need another gallon of blood to train these guys. So we use bleach to train. That's how similar it is. So when you see that footprint right there, you say it's either blood or probably bleach. So here's what happened during this investigation. A woman named Patricia Stefanoni, she's in charge of the scientific police there. She's looking for any indication of who did this. And so she finds a footprint in the hall that she believes is Amanda's. And so all you know now is it's either bleach or blood. It's what's called a presumptive test. So you have to do a secondary test on this, and that's what's called a TMB test, a tetramethylbenzidine test. I can say it, so I'm an FBI agent. There is actually a kit in the evidence response van that's a TMB kit. If you find, I mean, that thing on the right, Eureka, you may have solved the case. All you have to do is prove it's blood. But they didn't check to see if it was blood. How do you do that? How do you find a footprint like that and just say, I'm not going to check to see if it's blood? That's incomprehensible. I couldn't figure out why that would be. But that's only what they said the first time. This is Patricia Stefanoni, and early in the trial, she said, no, we saw those footprints, but you know, they were either bleach or they were either blood or fruit juice. You decide. Well, guess what? Later on in the trial, it was revealed that they had tested for blood, and it wasn't blood. They lied. She perjured herself on the stand. To what purpose? The purpose could only be to convict Amanda Knox. That is the only reason she would do that. Now, you're saying, where did the bleach come from then? Have any of you ever taken a shower? Raise your hand. Thank you. If you have taken a shower, and if your shower is cleaner than mine, you've used bleach on it. You have sprayed the walls with it. You use bleach in bathroom cleaners because it kills mold, right? So these are the 5 top Italian bathroom cleaners. All of them have bleach as a major ingredient. So if you spray it on the walls, you don't even have to spray it on the floor. If you spray it on the walls, when you turn on the water, guess where it goes? To the floor. So you're actually standing all the time in a shower, you're standing in a weak bleach solution. So when you come out of a shower, you're going to have some bleach footprints around. In fact, let me show you something here. You see all around the footprint, you see how the bricks are outlined in the luminol reaction there? That's because the floor cleaner had some bleach in it and stuck in the cracks and the holes. This is just the most ridiculous lynching I've ever seen in my life. There was not a single trace of Amanda in the murder room. Nothing. Nothing. Not a single credible trace of Raphael Solecito in the murder room. They'll talk to you about the broad clasp, but I will guarantee you that within a few weeks, you're going to see that that's going to be thrown out as bogus. Now we come to the part where everybody says, oh, Amanda said she came home the morning after the murder and walked around in this house where blood was, where somebody had been murdered. Have you all heard that? She came home, and how could she just walk around in all this blood and not say anything? Let me show you how. The Lifetime movie said that this is an actual scene from the Lifetime movie. They said, this is what Amanda saw in the bathroom. That would alarm me. This is what the Perugian police released to the public. All right? That's what they released to the public. That's what Amanda saw. That's the bathroom the morning of the murder. That's it. Find me the big splashes of blood. Look in the shower. No mold, no blood. Look at the sink. That's what really was there. That's when you start saying, oh my God, this is intentional. That's the photo they released to the public of the sink. That photo was taken December 18th, 6 weeks after the original crime. If anything, they have totally messed up his room. What you see there, that pink stuff is what's called phenolphthalein, and it is a chemical that they spray on there to see if there is blood. And what you do is you spray it on, and if it turns pink within 1 minute, you found blood. If it turns pink after 5 minutes, which it's going to do, there's no blood there. So they just left it on the wall, and knowing that the jurors are not sequestered in this little town of Perugia, they released this and said, that's blood. There's the photo released by the police, and on the left is what it really looked like. You think this was a fair investigation? Now let's talk about the staged break-in that they said they caused. This is absolutely one of the most incredible lies I've ever seen in a court outside of Iran. Okay, if you see here, look carefully on the left side, and on the right side of the left side picture, you're going to see an outdoor shutter, a green shutter. Do you see that? Then in the middle, there's a glass window. On the left side is the indoor shutter. Got it? What I want you to look at is this. The glass goes all the way up, but it was broken, the bottom half was broken, and you've got a divot right there. The police said that this burglary was staged because it was obvious to them that somebody threw a rock from inside the house outside the house. If you look down at the bottom right, you see that divot? That is, you're standing outside or sitting outside, that would be inside. There is a divot right there, and you see below and to the left there, that white little dot there under the center thing? You know what that is? That's embedded glass. That's embedded glass. That is sandstone apparently in that divot, and that is fresh wood. If you look back a little bit here, if I can get you to go back, you can see that the unpainted wood all around is actually turned a gray color, but the fresh wood is a reddish color. It's very obvious that the stone was thrown through the window, it hit the shutter, and busted the shutter open. Anybody who thinks that the glass or that the stone was thrown from inside out is either an idiot or lying. I can't tell you which. This is the room. There's that green shutter. They say that the reason they know that this was staged is because when they got there, there was clothes on top of the glass, the broken glass in the room. Well, you'd think that the glass would be on top of everything, wouldn't you? Unless a burglar came in and started throwing things on the floor after the glass was broken. If you look on the purse or the bed, you'll see a purse. You'll see the contents of the purse all over the floor, all over the bed. You will see that he went through her clothes hamper there, or clothes cabinet there, threw everything on the floor. That is why there are clothes on top of the glass. Why is that so hard? Glass fracture examinations can determine the direction and type of breaking force. So all they had to do is send the broken shards of glass, and they would have told them whether the rock was thrown inside or outside. Guess what? They didn't test that. Why do you think they didn't test that? They never did any testing which had the potential of contradicting them. If it possibly contradicted them, they didn't do the testing, or they did it and lied about the results. This is the evidence of Rudy Gaudet in the murder room. The DNA was found on the victim. His DNA was found on the victim. His DNA was found inside the victim. His DNA with the victim's blood was found on the victim's purse. His fecal matter was in the crime scene bathroom. His shoe prints in victim's blood were found all over the murder room, all over the murder house. His handprints in the victim's blood were found in the murder room in the hallway. His handprints in the victim's blood were found on the wall of the murder room. His handprints in the victim's blood were found on the pillowcase and the pillow that somebody had put under her hips to give them easier. I'm just not going to say it. This is the evidence of Amanda Knox in the murder room. You need more time to copy it down? When is a murder weapon not a murder weapon? When the Peruvian police says it is. This was the murder weapon, allegedly. If you look down on the bottom, or on the right-hand side here next to the O, you will see the outline in blood of the knife, and that's in Meredith's blood, the outline of the knife that was put down next to her purse on the sheet. Here's the problem. It's a different shape than the knife that they said is the murder weapon, and they are significantly different sizes. It can't be the same knife. The other thing was the attack was from behind, and I had some really cool graphics here, but forget them. If you will look under the right-hand side, just draw a line about an inch down below her jaw, all the way down horizontally in front. And then on this left side, just imagine 2 horizontal stab wounds. Okay? Here's the problem with the prosecution's theory of this. Imagine this is a knife, okay? They said that Amanda was in front of her and that she stabbed her like this. At that point, you have a vertical knife wound. Vertical, not horizontal. You can't really do it that way. The only way the horizontal knife cuts work is if you come behind somebody, hold their head, and stab and cut. Then the knife is horizontal. The first thing that let me know that there was a serious problem here was the knife wounds were horizontal, which means it came from behind. And if you looked, you would see bruises on Meredith's face right here, 4 bruises. Doesn't it look like somebody's holding her mouth closed? The cross-contamination is unbelievable. You see these men in bubble suits? This bothers me a lot. I just found this out recently. I was looking at these things and I'm thinking, well, surely they changed their boots when they went from room to room. You have to change your boots when you go from room to room. Imagine if you have to change your gloves every time you touch something. Imagine you've cut yourself, you're waiting in the doctor's office, he comes in with his gloves covered with blood, and he says, okay, let's start. No, not until you change those gloves. Why? Because whatever's on those gloves are going to come to you, okay? You don't want that. So you want to change your gloves and boots every chance you get. So here's my team, by the way, part of my team on the right-hand side. That's Karachi, that's a bomb factory. That's where they built the bomb that blew up the U.S. consulate. If you see, we have booties there, you have gloves, you have spare gloves on the ground, and this was only for one room. And what you do is when you leave the room, you take your booties off, you get another pair of booties. They're 30 cents a pair. Okay, there they are on the left-hand side. How often did the technicians change their shoes and boot covers? Never. Well, you say, well, they probably didn't step in anything. No, they went in and out of the house. Everything that was outside of the house is now brought inside. These, I found out, are not the normal crime scene suits. These are what are called biological suits, 3B barrier suits. These are suits to protect these guys from blood contamination, not to protect the crime scene. Now, they didn't step in blood. Sure. They're stepping in wet blood, and this same technician walked all over the house without changing those boots. These are cloth booties. Do you think he may have transferred some things from room to room? I checked, and these are made by a company, just in case you don't believe me, I checked with Indutex, found these are close-ups, and I was able to find the exact brand, model number, everything. These are not the suits that you should be using in that crime scene. They never change their boots, they never change their gloves. Everything is cross-contaminated. This is the FBI handbook. Absorb suspected liquid blood into a clean cotton cloth or swab, air dry the cloth, and pack in clean paper in an envelope. Do not use plastic containers. This is a video clip that I watched. What they do is they get a wet piece of blood on a swab, stick it right in that plastic airtight container and close it. Which is why you're going to find out that some of the evidence now, the bra clasp, half the blood samples were all destroyed for improper packaging. The other thing you do is you never, ever, ever use the same utensil twice, because it gets contaminated when it touches the evidence. In the FBI, we had stacks, boxes of these tweezers, you know, like picnic table utensils. And we threw them away after every use. These are not stainless steel ones. They use them for every single thing they did. Here are the people poking around at the bra clasp. If you look there, there's dirt and possibly blood on one of the fingers. And they failed to collect critical evidence. The incredible journey of the bra clasp. This is the day after the murder. It's found and photographed. Here it is 6 weeks later, still on the floor in a different place. How did that happen? You tell me. Do you think in a murder where a woman's been sexually assaulted that possibly the clasp of her bra would be important? Do you think you might want to pick that up? Well, there it is 6 weeks later. I don't know how it got back there, but it got back there just after they found that the shoe prints of Rafael Solecito weren't going to help him in court. And then they went back to the crime scene and found the bra clasp. Ooh, amazing. And guess what? It had Rafael's DNA on it. How cool was that? Then if you look at the right-hand side, there it is again in a different place and next to the lighting cord that they were using. Now, November 2nd, it's a nice clean bra clasp. You see it 6 weeks later. You think there might be some contamination there? Would you find anything of evidentiary value in that room? You have the purse, you have the bloody fingerprints on the wall, and you'd certainly want to take the purse, wouldn't you? See who touched it? Rudy's DNA ended up on that, her blood was on it. But guess what? 6 weeks later, there it is. They never picked up the purse. 6 weeks later, Meredith's bloody sweatshirt, which they had thrown all over the place, was right next to her head. The guy on the left digs it out of the dirty clothes, throws it on the ground, and then with those blood-covered plastic gloves, digs back into the dirty clothes things, effectively destroying every bit of evidence in there. They didn't take her shoes or her socks. There's the rock, November 2nd. There it is, 6 weeks later. Apparently not important. This is the pillow I talked about. This was under Meredith's hips. And guess what they found on there? Semen. And the police refused to test it. I can't tell you why. So, what's been going on here is the police heard a horse, said it was a zebra, and now they've spent the last few months trying to paint stripes on a horse. This crime scene was contaminated beyond all usefulness. They testified, they lied in public statements, and they lied on the stand. They didn't document the crime scene. They made misleading leaks to the press. They refused to do the investigation that had any potential to contradict their conclusions. They intentionally concealed exculpatory evidence. There is no physical evidence whatsoever that supports the prosecution, because you're going to see the knife and the bra clasp are going to be thrown out. This is simple, basic incompetence on a weapons grade scale. This will be an academy class in most forensic academies, I hope. They cherry-picked evidence, and the decision on the guilt of Amanda Knox was made prior to the evidence being returned. This was the worst case I have ever seen in a Western country, and that's why I'm so bothered. Thanks.
It has been a matter of language and distance. Matters of emphasis, matters of understanding of terminology. These have been challenges from day one. The family had to sort through 10,000 documents and pieces of evidence in the course of trying to defend their daughter. Unfortunately, none of those documents had been translated. So anything they wanted translated, they had to seek independent translation of, hopefully with the help of knowledgeable people on both sides of the water. Another area that's very difficult to comprehend quite often, and that has matters of interpretation at stake, is the DNA. The DNA in this case was given great emphasis during the trial. Dr. Waterbury will discuss the DNA and explain his feelings in that regard. Thank you.
And now, how do I bring this up? Oh, here we go. Yeah, I got it. Hi everyone, it's great to be here at Seattle University. We really appreciate the opportunity to talk here. I'm going to be talking about canaries in the DNA mine shaft because Amanda and Raphael really have been the leading edge of people who are being convicted in part on the basis of absolutely outrageous abuses of DNA evidence. DNA evidence, oh my God, someone must be guilty. It sounds so impressive, and it has a tremendously impressive record. DNA forensics, DNA profiling is the most powerful forensic technique ever developed. Unfortunately, that also makes it a great tool to abuse. If you use the reputation of a real technique and you abuse it in various ways, then you are turning things around and making it so that something that is a really powerful technique for solving real crimes and putting criminals away winds up being turned into something that can put innocent people away. There are four major examples. There are some minor ones, but major cases of abuse of DNA evidence in this trial. I'm going to focus on just one of those, the kitchen knife of Raphael Solecito. First of all, I want to say something about my perspective, because sometimes people, a small number of people say that we are in this somehow for the money, as if we are all mouthpieces for some vast media campaign. That is absolute nonsense. I've had no prior connections to this case before the trial got underway. What I saw in the papers did not make sense to me. As I learned about the trial and looked at the evidence, it absolutely did not stack up. So as I realized fairly early on that Amanda and Raphael were innocent, it just amazed me that these people just kept piling on, that the press kept piling on and various other people kept piling on, and circulating these absolute lies about what had happened, and shaping public opinion, misshaping public opinion. So I came to be convinced very early on of Amanda and Raphael's evidence and support their release. So I had that bias built in. We had actually had some discussions about having someone come in and represent the guilty side. Unfortunately, Charlie Sheen is not able to make it. As Steve has just relayed here, no traces of Amanda Knox were ever found in Meredith's room. No fingerprints, footprints, shoe prints, DNA, no blood, nothing. This is important to realize that it isn't as if there is all of this evidence that really makes it look like she did this, and the knife is just one little added piece. The knife stands alone. There is nothing else that suggests her guilt, nothing that is real. There were some witnesses. There was a fellow named Cocomani who turns out to be a cocaine addict. There was another fellow named Curatolo who turns out to be a heroin addict, self-proclaimed heroin addict, who has lived on the park bench in the area for the last 8 years. Then there was another woman who reported that she heard a scream, a terrible scream. It turns out, and we just recently discovered this, that she was half deaf and somewhat mentally ill. Then there's the murderer, Rudy Guide, who over time has come to say, oh, I think I saw Raphael's outline, and I'm pretty sure I heard Amanda's voice. Those are the only witnesses. So all of this is in isolation. This leads up to the knife itself, which is an absolutely ordinary kitchen knife from Raphael's kitchen drawer. It wasn't something found at the murder scene. It was something that was about a half a mile away. It does not match the wounds or an imprint at the scene. This single item was selected from the drawer, from Raphael's kitchen drawer, because the police officer said it looked especially clean. Now, I don't know if you keep dirty knives in your kitchen drawers, but an especially clean knife hopefully would not stand out in mine. They took this knife, put it in an ordinary envelope. It sat on a desk at the police station for a while. It was collected by people who, as you had seen from Steve's pictures of the crime scene, people who had been through this tremendously bloody environment where there are all kinds of sources of contamination. They did almost nothing to prevent contamination. They transferred it to an ordinary box. I think it was a cardboard box, mailed it off to the crime lab. So this knife had no special handling, no special laboratory. It was just a kitchen implement that they picked up. Nevertheless, what happened in the press was what I call a media mantra that has been recited over and over again. Amanda's DNA on the handle, Meredith's on the blade. Nancy Grace recited this and said, case closed. My gosh, they found it. But this is absolute nonsense. And to look at the DNA evidence and understand it, if you talk with a pure DNA forensics person, I'm a generalist, I cover a lot of ground, so I learned the DNA partly in the course of this. But if you talk with them and get down into the nitty-gritty details, you get a tremendous amount of complexity that adds really very little to the understanding of what this evidence means. Because the real key parts of the knife evidence and of the other DNA evidence is more in the realm of common sense. Is this test result in any way related to what actually happened? Is this test result related to the evidence? But Amanda's DNA was reportedly, and that may be contradicted soon by these independent experts, but it was reported by Ms. Patrizia Stefanoni to have been found on the handle of the knife. Well, she cooked with it. It was a kitchen knife. It was at Raphael's. They had spent the previous week together cooking meals there. It is in no way surprising for her DNA to be on the handle. My DNA is probably on the handles of knives and other implements in my kitchen drawer. In your DNA, I don't know how many of you, the students here, have kitchens at this point, but your DNA is probably on the handle of your knives. This independent expert's report, which was denied in the trial of first instance, but is finally being allowed in the course of the appeals trial, is reported, and this is yet another media leak, but it is reported from a variety of Italian media that they have said that there was no DNA on the knife. There was never enough biological material to get any kind of characterization of it, and also furthermore, there was no bleach on the knife. They were accused of having cleaned the knife with using bleach. The second part of the media mantra has been Meredith's on the blade, Meredith's DNA on the blade. The blade was tested first by Dr. Stefanoni for blood with tetramethylbenzidine, and the result was negative. Now that means that there was no blood on that blade. So whatever was on it, I guess, would have to be some other kind of cells. Why would those other cells be on the blade? It doesn't make any sense. Then they tested it with something called PCR-STR DNA profiling. That stands for polymerase chain reaction short tandem repeat, so you can see why they use the acronyms. The instrument results from this said, too low. There was no DNA on that knife blade. But not wanting to be stopped by the simple reporting of the instrument, Dr. Stefanoni blew up the noise at the bottom of the graph. Now, there are reasons not to confuse that kind of noise with real data. I've had some direct experience with this myself. I used to be the chief technology officer of a company that produced and supported forensic identification tools. And these are extremely sensitive devices. They would pick up a very unusual material. I once got a call that some of these devices had been taken in a client in Turkey. They had taken the detector into a bathroom, turned out the lights, pointed the detector at a toilet, and the detector detected the toilet. And so they were very upset by this. They wanted it only to detect this package. And I tried to explain to them that what they should do is not point it at a toilet. That if you could tell the difference between a toilet and a package, you were all set. But this is an example of what happens when you try to take the sensitivity of an acutely sensitive electronic or instrumental device, and you just arbitrarily blow up this sensitivity far beyond what the manufacturer intends. You wind up detecting Turkish toilets. That brings us to noise and negativity. The noise in the case of DNA is a very special kind of noise. It isn't just there's a static and so forth that's kind of random, but that's not really the problem noise. The problem noise with DNA profiling is DNA. DNA that comes from sources that you don't expect. There is a background of this material that is all over the place. This auditorium has the DNA in it of thousands upon thousands of people, for instance. So if you turn the sensitivity of one of these profilers up to extreme levels, and with this polymerase chain reaction, you have the ability to magnify things millions upon millions of times. It just doubles and doubles and doubles and doubles, and as geometrically increasing it. But what you wind up with is detection of DNA that comes from spurious sources. You don't know where the DNA has come from. In this case, there are many samples that have been detected. Many samples, I point out here, of Meredith's blood had been tested in that same lab with the same equipment by the same people. DNA testing doesn't just happen. It proceeds in equipment. It has glassware, and if you don't perfectly clean that glassware, there is residual DNA left. This happens all the time. It is not at all surprising then that the profile that was blown up to extreme levels matches Meredith, because Meredith's blood, Meredith's DNA samples were all over the place. So getting a microscopic amount of those doesn't mean a darn thing. Now what's usually done is they run what are called negative control tests. These negative controls, you just run a blank. You run this PCR-STR profiling without any sample at all.
And this negative control should yield a 0 result. But what happens often is that you wind up with positive results from these negative control tests. So you run a negative control, and son of a gun, DNA seems to come out of nowhere. One expert testified at the trial that they had an instrument that had been used to test sheep's DNA, and that sheep's DNA seemed to live in the instrument. It just kept coming back, and they couldn't get rid of the profile of sheep DNA that seemed to be trapped somewhere in the instrument. Now, these if negative control tests were run, we don't know about them because the prosecution adamantly refuses to release those tests. So the question is, what are they hiding? What is Dr. Stefanoni hiding? If she didn't run the test, she's incompetent. If she did run the test and refuses to release them, then there's corruption involved. Here's an example of an electrophurogram. This is actually the one from the class. And I just wanted to show this to you so you get an idea of the differences between a real signal and the noise. If you look here, these large peaks are the real signal. Those are peaks that correspond to Meredith. This stuff down here that is extremely low level, that is the noise that is from numerous other people, and one of them might be Raphael. You really don't know. Now, in the case of the Brock class, the signals were actually in around 1/2 to 1/3 as strong as these extremely low-level peaks. So it was even lower than this. The noise then in a DNA profiling test comes from DNA that does not come. Did I just go backwards? Yes. Yes. Okay, let's go forward instead. So we have extreme sensitivity in DNA profiling in the first place. But what is happening now, and this is why I think it's especially important to understand this canaries in the mind aspect of things, because a brand new technique is on the horizon. It is now being worked on and codified, developed in the world's DNA profiling laboratories. And they're trying to basically turn up the amplitude on this test to unbelievably high levels so that you are, one of the methods they call touch DNA. If someone simply touches something, you can get a profile. So there's a number of different names that are applied to this. One is low template DNA. That's when you have only a few molecules. Literally, we're talking 3 or 4 molecules. Another one that is the one that a number of experts are trying to put on a solid legal footing is called low copy number DNA, LCN DNA. And what they're doing is adding a bunch of different procedures in order to check for contamination, in order to double check what they've done so that the experiment is reproducible. So you can do it more than once, so that you don't have something that can, as an experiment that can never ever be done again. There's a journal called the Journal of Irreproducible Results, and they have just outrageous articles in there because you can never reproduce these results. Well, these knife tests absolutely can never be reproduced because they destroyed the sample in the course of the test. But these low copy number tests then use a special, separate laboratory. It is physically removed from the laboratory that is used for normal DNA testing. It has special handling procedures. You perform multiple tests, you split the thing up and you do 3 different tests and then compare them. Only if those 3 tests agree do you use the results. And there are a number of other precautions. Stefanoni didn't do any of that. What she did was take a result that said too low, too low, too low. That's what the instrument reported to her. And she blew the numbers up and so that you could see this noise at the bottom of the graph. That noise, if you run enough negative control tests, you will get noise at the bottom of the graph. And if in the laboratory that you're working in has tested samples of a victim's blood, you're going to get noise that corresponds to the victim. So this is a tremendously dangerous situation in general, but it's made far more dangerous because what Stefanoni did basically was she winged it. She made up a brand new scientific technique on the fly. That's why I mentioned in my biography thing there that Tom read that I did develop some new experimental techniques. It's hard work to develop a brand new experimental technique. It takes years. She just did this on the fly, reported the results, and used that to convict 2 innocent people. Now some quotes here that I want to mention in terms of connecting the DNA profile with the evidence. Peter Gill, one of the most famous people in this field, says interpretation of DNA profiles is assisted by the use of systems that are not too sensitive. This is important because the scientist often needs to associate the presence of a blood stain or other evidence with the DNA profile itself. You have a profile, but did this profile really come from the evidence, or did this profile come from the handling? Did it come from the laboratory? You've got to know that. You've got to be sure of that, or you're sure of nothing. And then the tradition over many years has been, for very sound reasons, that anything found in a negative control invalidates the analysis. These negative controls are absolutely vital. Now, my own guess as to what happened is something like this. Stefanoni did run negative control. She knew that in her laboratory there was a background noise of Meredith's blood. If you test enough samples that have nothing on them, then you're going to wind up testing a sample that is going to give you a positive result. Even though it is actually a negative, it is a negative control, you're going to get a positive result. The knife test, I believe, was a negative control, effectively. There was no DNA on that knife. So what happens when you do this kind of no template DNA profiling? And I have to confess, I made up the term NT-DNA. Everyone else talks about low template and low copy number. Well, what's interesting to me is what happens if there isn't any darn DNA on that sample. What are the results that you're going to get? Well, what you get is exactly what was reported by Stefanoni. Too low, too low, too low. But she only released that information after the judge demanded it and still refused to release the negative control test. So that was part of a stack of notes that were finally released to the defense. So what you have here is a situation where if I took a kitchen knife from your kitchen drawer and tested it in the same lab under the same conditions where these other tests had also been done, it would have yielded the exact same result. Your DNA on the handle, Meredith's on the blade. This is why I say that Amanda and Raphael have been canaries in the DNA mine shaft. A brand new technique is on the frontier, this low copy number DNA testing. If this is done well, it can be a tremendously powerful tool. If it is abused, it is going to put a lot of innocent people in prison and make it a situation where anyone can be convicted of any crime, anytime, anywhere. We need to have far better control, oversight, reproducibility, and observance of the test protocols. None of this was done in this case. The abuse of DNA profiling to convict Amanda and Raphael could have happened to anyone. They were in the wrong place at the wrong time and they were targeted. This could happen to you as well. That's it. Thank you.
Holland had to leave due to a family obligation, and says there's no reflection on anything taking place here, but he had to get home to take care of something. We have our last speaker, Paul Cialino, and we will take questions afterwards. Paul is going to address the interrogation of Amanda and also how wrongful convictions happen.
I take your issue on this.
Can you turn up the house lights, please? Can we turn up the house lights? Thank you. I can see everybody. Any enemies I perceive are real out there. Okay? There's a reason I'm last, okay? This is now the adult hour, folks. This is the R-rated section because I got to tell you, I'm not going to be nice, all right? I've been in Italy. I investigated this case early on, and when I went there, I read maybe 3,000 to 4,000 pages of translations prior to going there. I worked for CBS News. And I want to tell you one thing about CBS. We don't care if you did it. We don't care if you're innocent. We like a story. We want to do a story. That's all we care about. Now, I'm a little bit different because I'm able to give an opinion. I am not a journalist. I'm an investigator. And I do give opinions. And I'm very, very seldom wrong. I've been doing this for 30 years, and I don't miss too many of them anymore. And I can tell you a number of things that occurred in this case that would not occur anywhere else. First off, I'm Italian. I was raised by Italians, and my ass kicked by Italians my whole life. I love Italians, okay? It's obvious I love Italians. I eat pasta all the time. So listen, I I don't have a problem with the Italians. I don't have a problem with Italy. They're different than we are. I worked in Brazil, Mexico, Ireland, Canada. They're all different than we are. And guess what? They don't like us. If you're an American and you're over there, you better behave. Because if you're not on your best behavior, they will lock your ass up and they don't care. They don't care if your mommy's got money. They don't care if your daddy's important. They will throw the key away in most foreign countries. And I've experienced it firsthand with clients who've been sat in jails for no good reason other than the wrong place, wrong time. Now here's something very unusual that just eats my ass. We have a guy prosecuting this case who was a convicted felon. He was under indictment. Now think, if you will, a U.S. attorney in the United States who's under indictment prosecuting the largest sex murder crime in the history of the state of Washington. You think it would happen? Anywhere? Not in any Western country would this happen. But Mr. McNeely, this isn't his first rodeo, okay? There's a guy named Doug Preston, and you all need to get his book. He's a best-selling New York Times author. He don't need any more money, but it's a great education. And he wrote a book called The Monster of Florence. And he writes his experience with McNeely predates Amanda by several years. Doug is fluent in Italian, spent a lot of time in Italy as a child. He's a great writer, he's a great newspaper writer. He went to Brown, you know how they are, all snobby East Coast kind of guys that write really well and never say shit or ain't or don't. A lot of big words. And he's very successful. He's got more money than all of us in this room together, probably. So he's over in Italy, and like most rich, bright white guys are, they get bored because they get tired of looking at your wife and kids every day. I know I do, okay? And they can't take me for too long. So one of us, there's got to be a break in the action. Someone's got to leave the house. So Doug is reading in Italian this whole series of murders of these young girls and young men. In Italy, there's a problem. The boys never leave home, okay? They're 40 years old, they're still sitting in their boxer shorts, spooning off mom and dad, and they don't leave home. Now, this causes some problems, and the problem is they can't bring their girlfriend home because mom and dad don't want to be listening to the noise from their 40-year-old son and their girlfriend. So what happens? This is the no kidding problem. They have sex in cars in Italy. You will drive through the streets of Rome and you will see newspapers all the time on cars parked. Newspapers on every window. That's because people are having sex in the cars. And in the countryside, they go out to the olive vineyards and grapes and wherever. Well, many years ago, some degenerate was killing these people who were out there in Lover's Lane, for lack of a word. They would shoot the man in the head, they would drag the woman outside of the car, and they would sexually mutilate her and kill her. And this went on for a number of years. Well, the guy who brought you the Amanda Knox disaster is the guy who's going to do this disaster, McNeely. McNeely decided he'd accuse about everybody he can accuse. He accused about 9 people until he got tired of it. And by the way, Preston and this writer named Mario Spizzi were writing a series of stories. And they were very favorable stories towards the prosecutor, the police, their work. But McNeely, Preston and Spizzi started noticing that he was arresting dead guys and stuff. I can't make this up, okay? So they started being a little critical in their writings about the prosecutor McNeely because he's nuts. And he's arresting everybody. And so what happens is the police at Spizzi's house and they accuse Mario Spizzi of being a mass murderer. And they lock him up. Okay? They lock him up. Now, never mind, we don't care about evidence. We don't need no stinking evidence. I said you're the guy who did it. Now, Mario's in jail, and his house has been ransacked by 50 cops, and they've taken everything out of there but the crucifix on the wall. And now he calls Preston up and says, Mr. Preston, I'd like to have a conversation with you. Please come down to the police station. And the conversation is as follows. We know that you've been concealing homicides that your buddy's been committing. And if you don't confess right now and tell us Spizzi did this, you're going to jail, I'm going to lock you up, and I'm going to lock up your family too. Well, this goes on all night. Does this sound familiar to you guys? All night long in the police station. And we're going to get to that in a minute, this nonsense, this so-called confession. But Preston and McNeely come to an understanding. McNeely says, all right, Mr. Preston, you're not going to confess, you're a famous writer, you win. You got 8 hours to get your family out of this country, I'm putting you in jail. Preston was on the first thing smoking out of Italy with his family, never to return again. That's Doug Preston's experience with this prosecutor, who was under indictment for official misconduct, illegal wiretaps, and a host of other crimes when he got involved in the Amanda case. And believe me, he needs to rehabilitate himself really quickly here. This is why Amanda Knox is in jail, basically, because she got into that perfect storm. We have a prosecutor who's under indictment, whose reputation is ruined, who's got a lot of baggage and a lot of problems, and man, look who walks into my little office but Amanda Knox and Raphael Salicio. Wow. This is my lucky day. And they create a case. Now, I want to tell you, I'm not a fan of American justice. My colleague, Steve Moore, the FBI guy, he loves, you know, the flags and the big courtrooms and stuff. I have seen more crap in courts in this country than I'll ever see in Italy. I have seen the manufactured lying of evidence. I have seen them lie about DNA results. I have seen them put people in prison that had no business being in prison. So we're not any better than the Italians. And I'm not comparing this, but we do have a rogue prosecutor in this case. So this is what we're doing. This is the guy who's driving his train on Amanda Knox. Now I want to tell you something. It's very, very simple scientific principle. If I walk into your house and I stab you and I'm in your blood and I'm in the semen that's in the room and I'm in everything else, what's going to happen? I'm going to get up out of that house and walk over to my house. And I'm going to sit on my couch and I'm going to use my bathroom and I'm going to do this and do that. And what am I going to do? I'm going to transfer evidence from that homicide to my house. Have you ever heard of any evidence in Raphael's house that belonged to that crime scene? Ever. One time. Even the Italians couldn't figure that one out. We can make all kinds of DNA things up, and then when we get called on the carpet and independent experts look at it, it all goes to hell in a handbasket. But they could not take this bloody, horrible crime scene, and they couldn't put it anywhere but at the crime scene. And there's a good reason for that. Because Raphael and Amanda were not there. They didn't do it. They didn't participate in it. They didn't know about it. And let's talk about the Rudy, my great friend Rudy, Amanda and Raphael. Raphael seen Rudy for a hot 30 seconds in the apartment downstairs one day. Hi, hello, goodbye. Out the door they go. That's the relationship. I don't know if Raphael knew or not. Highly unlikely, because him and Amanda are in mad love. They're not hanging out with anyone the previous 2 weeks of this thing. Rudy, I'm in Italy 7 hours, and I talked to a guy who Rudy had broken into his house and held him at knife point in the middle of the night. Does this sound like our guy? Okay? Let's talk about Patrick, and Amanda dragged Patrick into it, and she pointed the finger at him. That's such bullshit, I can't stand it. Patrick gets dragged into this party because Amanda works for Patrick, and there's a series of text messages that night. Patrick, do you need me to work? Patrick, no, Amanda, we're not busy, but I'll let you know if I do. A couple hours later, Patrick, are you busy? Are you okay? Amanda, I'm good here. There's not many people. She writes back in Italian, see you later. Is Candace here? Yes. Anyone speak Italian? See you later. How do you say see you later in Italian? That's what she wrote. That see you later becomes, meet me at my flat and we're going to rape and kill my roommate. That's what it becomes. That's how Patrick gets dragged into this thing. Amanda doesn't say, Patrick, me and Patrick and Ralph raped and murdered her. That never happened. There's a series of texts, so that's why Patrick gets locked up, but we have a problem. We jumped the gun. This happens in America all the time. And what did we do? Whoops, we arrested a guy before the science came back. Oh, we're in trouble. Because what do we got? We got a bloody handprint in the purse. We got his semen inside of the victim. We got handprints on her wallet. We got fingerprints on the wall. This guy left a trail a blind man could follow. Even the Italians figured it out, okay? And most American law enforcement agencies would probably have got to it. But they arrested the wrong guy. So what do we do? Well, we'll put it all on Amanda. It's all Amanda's fault. She said that it was Patrick. Patrick was never mad at Amanda until he figured out he could bring her up and get maybe a $100,000 euro from her for accusing her falsely or something. This is how this whole thing of Patrick comes to light, and she accused Patrick. And let's talk about the confession. I don't want to keep you too much longer. If you brought your pajamas, it's probably good, but it won't be much longer. The confession. I have been to this police headquarters. This is one of the most modern, high-tech, most pristine buildings you've ever seen. They have interrogation rooms. They've got video in the ceilings in the bathroom, on the floors. They've got guards everywhere. They've got it all. Now I want to tell you something. I've taken a lot of murder confessions from a lot of bad guys, and the first thing we do is turn on the camera, because we don't want no mistake what happened in that confession. None. Now I can tell you what I do know about this confession. She's in jail, she's in custody for 14 hours. How many of you are 19 in this room? You're going to spend 19 hours with 7 cops screaming at you, accusing you of murder, accusing you of murdering your roommate? You think you'd be a little shook up after 15 or 20 minutes? How about 12, 14 hours? And I will tell you something, 12, 14 hours, I could have you confess to doing a homicide if I had you alone in that situation. But here's a little problem. Nobody speaks English. An interpreter shows up about the last hour and a half. But nobody speaking English. Amanda's Italian is non-existent at this point. Ciao, hello, see you later. That's it. Now she speaks it better than her lawyers do. And in fact, I think she should probably let her defend herself from here on. I mean, that's another story. There is no confession. If there was a confession, you'd have been seeing it on TV for the last 3 years. There's no confession. There's no admission. This is here, sign this, or you're never going to see your parents again confession. And, I might add, the Italian courts threw it out. Doesn't count there, doesn't count here, but there's no confession. That's what they're calling a confession in this case. So we have a prosecutor who's under indictment, who's now a convicted felon. I'm sorry, it's the truth. They don't like me talking about it, but it's true. It happened. He's convicted. He's appealing, but he's not locked up. We have this non-existent, the police investigation and the confession. Where the murder happened is a little house, and you saw it up there in the pictures that Candace has, kind of sits in a valley. And then there's like a 2-lane street, pretty busy street, wrapping around. And then across the street is a big-ass apartment building, like a block long, 4 stories high. And guess what it does? Everybody's living room window looks right down on top of that murder scene. I'm going to teach you Police 101 tonight, okay? If you're a policeman, and there's a murder in the house, and you got a dead body there, and you don't have any witnesses, or some mope standing there with a bloody knife in his hand when you pull up, who do you want to go talk to see if they've seen anything? You want to go, we call it canvassing the neighborhood in the States, okay? I don't know what they call it over there, but you go ring the doorbell and you say, hi, I'm with the police. Somebody got killed down there, and we're wondering if you saw anything. Now, this happened in November 1st. I got to Italy in January, I think. It all runs together. But I'm there early. So we go over to the apartment building, and I start knocking on doors. Guess what? No policeman has ever rung a doorbell in that building. To this day, ever, has anyone been interviewed in that building. Now, the night this happened is All Saints Day. All Saints Day in Italy is like Christmas here. This is a major, big-time holiday. This is serious stuff. The country shuts down. Everybody's home. There's all these parties. Everybody's eating dinner at mom and dad's house, sisters, etc. And everyone in that building, just about everyone, is there. It's lit up like Christmas Day because it is like Christmas Day over there. No police officer, no prosecutor, no one ever went to that building and rang the doorbell and asked, did you see anything? They didn't do it. The crazy woman who, I don't think did she ever testify? They didn't bring her in because she is crazy. As luck would have it, I'm ringing doorbells, and some lady screams from somewhere, is that a Chicago accent I hear? I cannot make this up, okay? Yes, it is. Can we come up and talk to you? She is the niece of the crazy woman on the first floor who's the star witness of the case that hears people screaming and yelling, okay? And she says, listen, my aunt hasn't been out of the house in 10 years. She's nuts. When her husband died, she lost it, and we have to take care of her, and she's mentally ill, and she's been hospitalized a bunch of times, and she's nice, and she's harmless, but she's crazy. And this is from her niece and nephew, who live in the building and take care of her. Now, that's in 15 minutes. 15 minutes we get there. Now, I'm starting to really smell a bad odor about the whole case. But it gets better, because I get to interview the guy who arrested Amanda. And he is, right out of the pages of OG magazine, man, he is a good-looking, sharp dude. And I can tell you, the women, they just faint him when he walks by. And he is like a rock star in the police department. So we have a conversation in police headquarters one day, and while I'm there, I'm looking at the wall of all the notorious criminals, baby killers, mafioso, etc. They dressed it, and they had like their pictures up on the wall, sort of like high school graduation pictures. And in the middle of their pictures is Amanda Knox standing there with 8 police officers around her, barking at her and attacking. And she's up on the wall. She hasn't been indicted. She hasn't been arrested. She's in pretrial custody. But she's already made the biggest cases they've ever had in Italy. This is how they perceive her. This is their O.J. Simpson, and they know it. So we're talking, and I said to them, you don't have any physical evidence. You don't have any eyewitnesses. You don't have a murder. But what do you got? Tell me, convince me why this girl did this. Tell me why we should come back and say the Italians got it right. We're being foolish. And he says, I'll tell you why. He says this in Italian to our interpreter. He goes, she was eating pizza. Okay. So I said to the interpreter, did he say she was eating pizza and that's why she... Ask him this way. He says, no, I understand. He says, a week after they initially made contact with Amanda, he's looking for Amanda and Raphael. And he has Raphael's cell phone. And he calls Raphael up. And he says, I want to see you and Amanda. And Raphael says, okay. And he says, where are you? He says, we're getting a pizza. We're right by the university. He says, come on over. And he said, at that moment, I knew she was guilty. This is from the head of the police. This is the big guy, okay? I knew she was guilty because if it was me, I'd be in bed, curled up crying still if my friend had been killed. I said, this is a week later. She's not supposed to eat. Okay? Is she, what is she, you telling me she should be in bed crying? Yes, that's what I'm telling you. I knew she was guilty when that happened. This is the case against Amanda Knox. This is what we're dealing with. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned here, okay? Because as Americans, we think we're bulletproof. Bad things aren't going to happen to us if we travel. We're hot stuff. We're the big #1 guy. We're not, we run the whole world. We're not perceived in places like Italy as running the whole world. We're perceived as meddlers, as Bigfooting everybody, as people who don't know how to mind their business, as being rude, as being obnoxious, and a host of other things. But let me tell you, there are no fan clubs over there, Amanda Knox, and Amanda Knox is in jail because of the publicity. The nonsense, ridiculous, insane stories that have been coming out since day one, and about 20 lunatics who sit in their mother's basement in their underwear and write anonymous emails to everybody in the world. That's why she's sitting in jail mostly, because they believe all this crap. And you've heard Moore, and you heard Mark, and you heard him debunk all this stuff, which we've been talking about. Listen, we've done 3 hours of network television in this thing. This is a big story because there is no evidence. This is a girl who's been sitting in a prison, a maximum security prison in Italy, for 1,000 nights or more. As is her Italian boyfriend, who's as innocent as she is. This is a crime against humanity. This is a crime against Amanda, mostly because she's American, she's pretty, and she didn't do the right things as a 19-year-old. Well, maybe she should not have been stretching in the police station after sitting there for 14 hours on a concrete bench. Big mistake, according to the Italians. Proves you're guilty. You don't care. You're cavalier about everything. You silly Americans. Well, we might be silly Americans, but at least we follow rules of evidence, and we have real DNA, and we have real eyewitnesses who aren't heroin addicts, who change their story every time they're interviewed, and we actually go out and interview people who may have witnessed a crime. We try to do the right thing sometimes. They don't like us pointing these things out to them. Once again, we're Bigfooting them. But the problem is, here's the problem. If we don't make a lot of noise, if we don't raise our voices, we won't be heard. She will sit in that prison for 26 years. She's going to come out of there because people are mad and they're aggravated and it's wrong and she shouldn't be there. That's why she's going to come out of there. She's not going to come out of there because the Italians are nice guys and they're going to admit they made a horrible mistake and that our prosecutor, yes indeed, he is crazy, but we don't care. We're not going to give her a redo. She may come out. She'll come out in a year or two is my best guess, okay? But she's going to come out because the State Department's going to get involved. It's going to become political. Somebody's going to get aggravated enough of, listen, Senator Patty Murray went on national TV, I've never seen it happen before, and said, listen, let her go. I know there's no innocent. Judge Hebe, who's gone now, liked to got himself in a whole storm at his office because he spoke out. As well, he should speak out. When you see something that's being done wrong, you should say something about it. You can have an opinion that you did it. I don't care if you're an idiot. It doesn't bother me. I don't think about it for 3 seconds. And maybe you have really good reasons, but hopefully we explain to you tonight some of the reasons why this is not a good thing. I still to this day, I really don't care if Amanda did it or didn't do it. This is my opinion, it's my personal opinion, based on 30 years of doing murder cases in this country and other countries, that there is no physical evidence, there's no eyewitnesses, there's no legitimate confession, there's nothing that pinned this kid to this crime. Nothing. And if we're going to be, you know, a nation of rules and laws, as is Italy and the other Western countries, we got to pay attention to our rules and laws. And they kind of just blew them all out of their folks. They just said, we're Italian, we don't have to worry about that. This is not our problem. We don't like her. Okay, she's arrogant, she's pretty, she's everything we don't like about you Americans, okay? And it's a big mistake, and I think cooler heads will prevail. But listen, there's a lot of Italians I spoke to who said, oh, we're so embarrassed. This is insane. I have Italian friends who watch Italian TV in Chicago, and I go, oh boy, she did it. I know she did it. I watch Italian TV, and I'm like, I don't argue with them because they're watching the insanity on TV all the time. So that's what we've dealt with this, and we've kept you a long time. We'll answer any questions you might have. I'll stay as long as it takes. If you want to talk to me at 9, I'm here till 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. But we appreciate you coming. This is an important issue. It affects everybody, and we really thank you for coming tonight and listening to our